Hi, it's Duke Dog again. This little video, I want to do one of my favorite sort of teaching tools. It's a way to build confidence. It's a way to train your mind to think about what you're doing. And I talk about the 4 cardinal blows. In the way I teach, there's really only 4 usable, repeatable, reliable shots that we throw in the SCA. It excludes thrusts. Thrusts are a different thing. Power generation is not done quite the same way with a thrust, and the body mechanics don't need to be as precise when we're trying to deliver power. Okay, so there's 4 of them, and I teach them in a particular order because they are differentiated only by the body dynamic and the mechanic of the sword. All right, I'm using a waster right now. I'll demonstrate it actually with a real rattan sword, and I'll probably hold up a shield just for balance and so everybody can see what the shot looks like when you're actually in a fight. Okay, but start out with number 1, the first shot, and I bet everybody can tell me the very first shot that they learn is, you got it, the flat snap. All right, there. That movement. That is the most natural. If you ask somebody to pick up a stick and hit something with it, that's what they're going to do. This movement, over the shoulder. Okay? So we want to refine that a little bit, right? Because we want it to be the most efficient with the fewest tells we can get and still have it deliver power. All right? So, as I've talked about in some other videos, it's hard to get away from it. Power generation in the SCA. Drive with the back foot, hip comes forward, shoulders follow, hand goes out. I've talked about generating power with this grip change, this roll of the fingers. Okay? 1, 1, 1. Now that shot, once you've mastered that, all of these shots, this body mechanic and this sword dynamic, where we also talked about the sword crossing the center line. Right? So I throw the shot, the hand crosses the center line. One sort of mnemonic that if I can't get someone to cross that line when they're in practice, if they're doing this, if they're trying to hit out here, I'm trying to snap the wrist, right? I try and get them to stop thinking of the blade and think about holding the pommel in their hand. And that there's a pane of glass standing up between us, right? Don't think about the blade. Think about breaking that pane of glass with the pommel. That usually gets them to twist their hips, and they might exaggerate a little bit, but that's okay. You're just trying to get them to cross that line. Trying to get them to go through that center. All right? So, cross, his hand comes out, these 2 fingers relax. Right? Because now it allows you to gain, that gives you back this. Okay? I also contend that this number 1 shot is this. Notice, the hip and the shoulder are the same as this. The only difference is I'm not crossing the line anymore. The sword is crossing the line. Okay? My hand goes out instead of across. But that's the only real difference. You might change your shoulders a bit. I'll tend to tip my head out of the way so that I can go straighter to my target. But the idea here is that you can teach somebody this movement, right? And give them confidence in this movement. And then it's just a very small change to go from this to this or to this. Okay? So this number 1 movement pretty much gives you all the targets from their sword arm all the way over to the top of their head and all the way down to the onside leg. 1 mechanic, 1 blow. And I think most everybody who's experienced will agree that throughout your career, that's the shot you're always looking for. It's not that you know 20 different ways to throw a shot. The experienced fighter is just looking for, trying to make his opponent give him that shot. Okay? So, that's 1, right? 1. And Let's demonstrate that with a real sword. Okay, I apologize if this is going to block some of my body. Notice how the heel lifts up off the ground as the knee drives forward. All right. So that's one. This is one. This is one. This is one. And straight down the center. It's all the same shot for me because the body mechanic is the same and the sword moves through the similar arc for everything. Okay? Now, once they have gotten comfortable with that, once a new fighter has gotten so that they feel completely comfortable throwing that shot and they can throw it with power pretty repeatedly, I may move them on to the second shot. Because the second shot is your most obvious combination shot. Number two is what I call a reverse. People call it offside, but this is an offside too. So I call it a reverse because, again, it's centered. The definition is centered around the body mechanic. So instead of this movement, the reverse is the reverse of that, the opposite. It's here. Okay? This has a more limited target area, but it's all on this side of the body. There's an assumption that that you're starting with the sword out in front. And that's probably the easiest to go from this combination here. And it's probably the first combination anybody learns. Or the opposite of that, this. Okay? So, but what I want to point out, I'm going to put the shield down. Is the body mechanic for that. And even without the sword already extended, the body mechanic for that is that. And notice that from one, I've turned this way. For two, the opposite way. The driving with the feet is a little different. I'm now pushing this hip forward. So this foot tends to turn, the heel tends to lift on this foot. The right foot may turn out a little bit so because you're changing your orientation. You don't want to stress your right knee. Right? So that's the difference from that to that. And this also requires, because your shoulder is moving back away from your opponent, it requires a little shorter range. So from there, often the reverse will require you to step in a little bit. Okay? And that gives you pretty much all the shots on this side of the body. It gets harder to throw that reverse low because it's a long way to travel and your sword is no longer moving in a flat arc. I can't even get down to that leg. From here, maybe. Yeah, my shield might probably get in the way too, but it's possible. But the head and the arm and even the body is not nearly as difficult. The way I teach the combination, the transition, is from here, turn the knuckles up and pull the sword towards the center of your body. As you do that, let the sword rise up, and as it reaches the pinnacle here, so that it's balanced in your hand, as it starts to drop over, that's when you initiate the turn. So from here, up, as it turns over, I'll do it slower. I'll actually try and do these in slow motion too, just to show. So here, there. Okay? So that's 2. 1, 2, 3. What do you think? The wrap. Now, the reason I go to the wrap is because we're going to go back to our very familiar number 1 body mechanic, but now the sword dynamic is completely different. Instead of going across into sort of a straight line here, right? Now, the purpose of a wrap is to get around a defense that is between you and your target. So you go outside of it. You go an outside line. The body mechanic's the same. I'm still throwing the basket hilt with the sword forward, just like in a number 1 shot. But now I'm having to throw it outside the line. Maybe, depending, maybe 20, 30 degrees off of that center line. The important mechanic here is where you change, because you hit with a wrap, you hit with the back edge. You hit with the thumb side edge, not the knuckle edge. So the tricky part of that shot is where do you turn it over? You don't want to turn it over too late because that's going to stress your wrist out. If you turn it over too early out here, you're going to mess with your elbow because your elbow is going to want to hyperextend. And you're locking the sword in and trying to power it that way. Not good. You want the sword to do the work. Just like in all these other shots. You want the sword to be doing the majority of the work. So what you're looking for, and again, you're throwing a flat, I'm trying to throw a flat arc, as though the sword is moving along a plate. That is the most efficient. It's the least time travel and the greatest momentum in that distance. So if I'm throwing a number 1 shot to the leg, say, it's here. Throwing the wrap to the leg, it's here. Now, that transition point for me is, as you throw the shot, as the sword becomes straight, forms a straight line with your forearm, is when you want to turn it over. And this gets into that rolling your hand again. I'm holding with these 2 fingers as I roll it over and control it with my thumb and forefinger. So same here with the head. Body, whatever. All of these shots work with that. Okay? I'm not really doing anything about recovering this at the moment. So let's demonstrate it with a real weapon. And when I say real, you guys know what I'm talking about. So, to the head, see, now my blade is parallel to the ground, edges on, right? My hand, there's room between my thumb and the grip when it finally lands, okay? But again, I'm letting the sword do as much of the work as possible. This is also something that's going to require a little bit of range because I'm now actually having to hit behind my target with that sweet spot. So I'm even a little bit closer. So, this is number 3, the wrap. And this is the hardest part to teach people, is where to transition that so that they aren't losing power. They aren't losing momentum as it comes around. Remember, you want the sword to be doing the work. Anytime that you're trying to force it with your hand, and you can, if you're in very tight, and you want to throw that wrap, and maybe you're trying to cheat the time and keep it in tight, you can pull a little bit back with those 2 fingers just to help it along. Timing is important. Timing is everything, right? But that's possible. You can do that. right? Yeah, I used to throw a shot. This is the same shot again. When we were all fighting with flat round shields strapped to our arms, I used to be able to throw a shot. It was this. Right up into the ribs here, sometimes up in the armpit. Useful shot. It's deceptive because the hand disappears behind your body. It comes up underneath. But it's difficult to do, and fighters are a lot savvier now than they used to be. But it's the same shot, right? Once you have figured out this mechanic, right, where to roll that and let the sword do the work, right? Now the difference is just in which direction you throw your hand. Instead of throwing it out in front of me, I'm throwing it behind me, and I'm letting that sword do its change right here at my leg. Just a little tip. Try it in practice, see what happens. All right. So that's number 3, the wrap. Now, number 4 is the moulinet. That's what I've always called it. It's always what I've heard it. I'm not sure if you guys have a different word for it, but it's this center line usually. It can be thrown offside here, right? But it's this transition, this rotation shot, right? The reason I keep it separate from the other shots is that while, again, this body movement is the primary power generation movement, the sword is no longer moving in this plane, it's moving in this plane, right? 90 degrees. So it's a little weird. You've got to translate this power into this movement, right? You've got a power that's moving in this plane. Now you have to translate into this plane. A way to think about that is, again, like breaking the glass, you're pulling the pommel around. And usually this shot is accomplished with the tip down. Again, talking about that arc that it has to go through to develop momentum. From here with my shoulder back and the tip down, my hand really in its original position from 1, right? My hand's, the only difference is my elbow has gone up because I have to go up for my hand to change position. Right? Tip is now down, but the moulinet shot is that. And that's all it is. The body mechanic is the same. Drive with the hip. Bring the shoulder around, hand goes out, but instead of the sword just trailing behind it and turning over naturally, I am pulling, right? And again, I'm pulling with these 2 fingers. I'm guiding with these. Okay? So trying to teach somebody that difference, though, you'll often transition that from some kind of an offside shot, right? Where you can draw the tip back towards you, and here I am in this position again, the tip down and the hand up. You missed that a little bit. So, how do we generate that shot again? From any position. I can throw it from here, but again, my sword's got to go through this loop because it really has to have this much arc to go through for it to count as a moulinet. And here's that other point is that I'm not crossing the line. And just like the wrap, I'm no longer crossing that center line. The whole shot now happens on this side of the center line. The sword may cross back over, right? But most of the movement of it is over here. So I am hitting actually, again, it's that flat arc, and you can't really see it. You'll be able to see it easier when I move the camera. The arc is at an angle, like this. Right? That's that flat arc I'm talking about. So, kind of like with the reverse, from this position, you're turning your knuckles into the shot first. Notice that my knuckles rise up, and this blade starts to move towards me, right? From this orientation, the blade is changing towards me. That puts it in its position so that it can arc in a flat trajectory and be edge on when it lands. This is the ideal. This is like a kata. This is an exaggeration of what is going on, okay? But this is the mechanic behind it. If you can demonstrate that mechanic and duplicate that mechanic, you'll get better and you'll cheat it a little bit, and you might start from a, maybe not this perfect position. You might start from out here. You can still do it. You might have to cheat it with a little bit more power from your arm or your shoulder or whatever. But the mechanic, the perfect mechanic, is that nice clean arc. You could turn it into an offside shot, offside leg, right? Here, here, but it's still going through that arc. That change is what you're looking for. So that's one, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay?